Hi, and welcome to my channel. Today we are discussing a true crime case from 1987. This case holds a special place in my heart. The name of the victim and I have, or the victim and I have the same name, Lisa. She officially died on my birthday in 1987. And this was actually the first true crime book that I ever read. It is the case of the state of New York versus Joel Steinberg in the death of Lisa Steinberg. And like I said, it holds a special place in my heart, being the first book I ever read. The title of that book is Lisa, Hedda, and Joel, the Steinberg Murder Case, and it was written by Sam Ehrlich. I believe I said his last name right. It's Ehrlich. So I'm going to go with Ehrlich. Um, and it is what started me on my journey in the true crime genre. It led me to a book by Anne Rule called Small Sacrifices, which is the story of Diane Downs. There had been quite a few documentaries on YouTube done about her. Just a horrific excuse for a human being, as is the center of this case, who is Joel Steinberg. And so we're just going to jump right in, no pretenses. And at the end of the video, I will have a quote unquote commercial. It is not sponsored. I am not paid for it, but it is a service that I think that you'll like, and I'd like to introduce you to it. So stick around and wait for that. But let's jump on in. Joel Barnett Steinberg was born on May 25th, 1941, in the town of Bronx, New York. His family moved to Yonkers when he was a teenager, and then he graduated from, in Yonkers is another suburb of New York. Uh, I don't think it's a borough, but it is a suburb. Um, anyway, Joel graduated from Gorton High School in, I believe, 1959, but he did not have the best of grades. But his grades, I guess, were good enough to get him into Fordham University, which is interesting because Joel is Jewish. He was raised Jewish. I, I don't think they were practicing. They definitely weren't Orthodox. Um, but it's interesting that he went to Fordham University because that is a Jesuit school. And if you don't know what Jesuit means, it just means that it's Catholic. So anyway, he graduated from Fordham in 1962 with a degree in political science, and he went on to New York University School of Law, where he studied law, of course. However, he dropped out in 1964, and it's not really known why. But in 1965, he joined the Air Force. And this was, I believe, he joined to kind of avoid being drafted. I think there was probably more freedom in what you would do if you enlisted instead of being drafted. So in 1965, he enlisted in the Air Force and he served for 3 years, where he gained the rank of lieutenant before being honorably discharged. And then when he got home from he had been overseas. It's not known if he was actually in Vietnam, but he was overseas. I'm assuming he was in Vietnam. But upon coming back to America, he re-entered college back at New York University, sorry, and continued his law studies. And there was a special program that was going on because of the Vietnam War, where if you were studying law and your studies were interrupted because of the Vietnam War. I keep wanting to say Civil War, so I'm sorry I keep pausing. But if your studies were interrupted due to the Vietnam War, um, you were exempt from having to take the bar exam. And I'm sure um, there were some rules that, things that had to be in play um, for that to happen, but he fit into that. And so once he graduated from New York University School of Law, he was a lawyer without having to take the bar. Um, and many believe, or at least some believe, that that was a good thing for him because he probably would not have passed the bar. He didn't do so well in high school. He did not do well at Fordham. Not quite sure how he got into law school. Might be it was a different era. Um, and you just kind of you got to go if you maybe his family had money or something. Who knows? But anyway, he graduated from law school, did not have to take the bar, and immediately began practicing law. And most of his clients were drug dealers and low-level mobsters. And he would often, because of who his clients were, he would often take drugs in payment for his services. So yeah, there's that. In fact, one former client said that he was constantly talking about drugs, asking everyone to get him drugs. But Steinberg denies that. So, of course, he does. And then we're going to move on to a woman named Hedda Nussbaum. She's also involved in this case. She was born in August of 1942 to a working class family. Her father was a hairdresser and owned a salon, and her mother was a homemaker, and they lived somewhere in New York. I don't know if they lived in the city or where they lived, but in 1970, Hedda graduated from Hunter College with a degree in English, and she began teaching English at a high school. But in 1974, she would be uh, offered a job with Random House Publishing as a junior children's book editor, and she accepted that position. And she, at that time, she moved to Manhattan. And by 1980, she had been promoted to senior editor of children's books at Random House, and she was doing very well. She had a very nice apartment, and she had a couple of friends at Random House. One of these friends that we're going to call Betty to protect her privacy. Betty was the only person from Random House that ever saw the inside of Hedda's apartment. And Betty said that Hedda's apartment was immaculate, that everything had its place and everything. There was nothing out of place. She had rows of plants that were all well taken care of, well cared for. She had shelves and shelves of books that were all neatly arranged. She even had a cat in her, and Hedda's apartment was so clean that there weren't even cat hairs anywhere. And Betty also said that the excuse me, Hedda's office was the same way at work, that it was just immaculate. Um, Hedda's professional career was going well, but she was getting to the point where she was ready to settle down, get married, and have some kids. And so she and a former roommate of hers decided that they would go to a couple of parties one weekend. And at one of these parties, Hedda met Joel. Joel was gregarious, he was outgoing, he was a little loud, whereas Hedda was a little more quiet and reserved and more introverted, where Joel was extroverted. She was drawn to him, she was attracted to him, and they immediately began dating. And they dated for about a month. But Joel was, even though Hedda wanted to get married, Joel was moving a little too fast for Hedda, and he was wanting to see her every night. He was, wanting to spend all of his free time with her, and it was just a little too much. So she broke it off, and then a few months later, they ran into each other again. Um, and she decided to give him a second chance. She had been so drawn to him that I think she probably really missed him, because she says, I started seeing him and really fell head over heels. And that was at the, when they met a few months later, and they began dating again. And this time it kind of stuck. And in January of 1976, Hedda moved into Joel's one bedroom apartment at 14 West 10th Street. And that is a brownstone, it's a beautiful brownstone, that had been, it was built in the 1850s, and then in 1937 it was converted into, I believe, I believe it was 1937, it was converted into apartments. Now this building it had some interesting history to it. There was a woman who had lived there. I didn't write down her name. I know her first name was Jan, and but I will, if I can remember, I'll put it in the comments. But she had lived there with her husband, on the top floor, and she was a writer. And she said that it was a haunted house. That there, I believe it was on the ground floor, that there was someone in white who stood there, um, and and that she saw a ghost or a specter or whatever you want to call it. And another interesting tidbit of information is that Mark Twain once lived there. Um, and there's even a placard on the outside of the building with his name on it, stating the dates that he lived there. And so this was a really nice, this is in Greenwich Village, which is a very, very nice area of New York. It's adjacent to Manhattan. Um, Now it's kind of hip and, you know, a happening place or whatever. Um, but anyway, in March of 1978, so Hedda and Joel are living in this apartment, in this one bedroom apartment together, and things are going well until March of 1978, when Hedda goes to the emergency room because Joel has hit her in the eye and she now has a black eye. And she reports to them, to the doctor, that it was her boyfriend who had hit her. But I don't know if it was a few hours or a few days later, she went back and asked that they redact what she had said and change it to that she had been injured somehow. She didn't really say, but she wanted Joel's name taken off the record to protect him. I guess because he was an attorney. Um, and so they apparently accommodated that, which I find a little interesting, a little odd, but whatever. Um, and she said that at first, the first time he hit her, he just completely love bombed her. He was doting on her. He was asking her forgiveness. He was very apologetic. He was very loving to her. And he told her he would never hit her again, and she believed him. She said, there was never a time during the relationship when I felt I can't stand this man. Most women who are in abusive relationships, after a while, they can't stand the man to touch them. I never felt that way about Joel. I just grew to love him more. And that's a quote from Hedda Nussbaum. By late 1980, Joel was abusing Hedda on a regular basis, and he was also freebasing cocaine. If you don't know what freebasing is, you can look that up. I'll give a little blurb. It's basically turning cocaine into a smokable substance. Cocaine does not burn very well. It needs something. It needs a catalyst to help it burn, and so freebasing is kind of the precursor to crack, um, where you mix the cocaine with some type of burnable substance like baking powder, I believe it's baking soda. Um, I One article I read said baking soda, and another one said baking powder. So I don't know which one. I don't freebase cocaine, um, but anyway, you mix the cocaine with the catalyst, which would be either baking soda or baking powder, and a little bit of water to make a paste, and then you cook it and it turns into rocks, and then you can smoke that. So that is freebasing in a nutshell. Um, and anyway, so he was freebasing, and she was freebasing with him. She was right there with him, smoking cocaine, smoking crack. Um, and she says that regardless of the abuse that Joel heaped upon her, she wanted to marry him. She was completely in love with this man. She said, quote, Joel refused to get married, and I went along with what he wanted, even though it wasn't what I wanted. And so, even though we weren't married, I still wanted to have children with him, and I was 35. Excuse me. You know, the old biological clock was ticking, so we started trying, and he wanted children very much. He got along great with kids, end quote. So they started trying to have a child, and when she didn't get pregnant, Joel contacted a doctor friend of his who was an OBGYN and asked him if he knew of anyone who was wanting to put up a child for adoption. Now, Joel had facilitated a few adoptions before, so this was nothing new to him. He drew up the papers, and the doctor told him yes, he did know a young woman who was 18 at the time. Her name was Michelle Launders, and when she found herself pregnant, she knew she couldn't have an abortion. That was against her beliefs, but she also knew that she couldn't care for the child financially. And so she had talked to her doctor about putting the baby up for adoption. And the doctor said, I have the perfect person to facilitate that for you. So on May 14th, 1981, little baby girl Launders was born to Michelle. And Michelle signed over her rights to, or sign the paperwork for an adoption to Joel. But Joel was just supposed to facilitate the adoption. He was not supposed to be the adopter. He told Michelle that he had a friend who was an attorney who was very well off, who lived on the Upper West Side of New York and wanted a child, and that this baby would be the perfect match for him, and that she, the baby girl, would be well taken care of, and she would have everything she could ever want or need. But he did not tell Michelle that he was the attorney and that he was abusive and he did drugs. And so Michelle signed over the rights to this unknown person who was actually Joel Steinberg. And Joel took the baby, actually, the doctor, the day after the baby was born, he and his wife went to the Steinberg home and delivered the baby girl, whom Joel and Hedda, named Elizabeth and called her Lisa. Um, Hedda said, quote, when the doctor and his wife brought her over and put her in my arms, it was the happiest moment of my life, end quote. So Joel and Hedda they were thrilled. They were very happy with this new baby girl. They were a family now, even though they weren't married, and Hedda wanted to be married. That was one thing that she really wanted that Joel just would not relent on. And so they continued their life. And friends describe Lisa as, quote, the most wonderful, loving creature who could talk to you like an adult, end quote. Not, obviously was when she was older. In 1982, Hedda was fired from Random House for chronic absenteeism. It seems that when Joel would beat her up, she would have to call into work for a few days because she'd be black and blue, and he, a lot of abusers will not hit their abusees in the face, so no one knows that they're being abused. But Joel didn't really have any desire to hide what he was doing, and so Hedda would have to call out from work for a couple of days until the bumps and bruises and cuts and black eyes and that kind of thing healed. Hedda went from being a very beautiful woman to a woman that didn't look anything like she had before. By the time this is all over, she is almost unrecognizable by her friends. But anyway, she was fired. Um, and Joel had Joel, because Hedda was so pretty, Joel would take her to his dinner meetings and meetings with clients and things like that. But by 1984, Hedda rarely left the apartment, and the only time she did was late at night to do the grocery shopping. So she was so beaten down that she didn't meet with friends, she didn't go out, except to do the grocery shopping late at night. Um, and we don't we know that Joel abused Lisa for quite a long time, or I'm sorry, Hedda for quite a long time, but we don't know when the abuse against Lisa started. However, we do know that by first grade she was being abused and she was being neglected. Um, Lisa attended Greenwich Village School, or PS 41, as they call them in New York, by a number. And this school is located, it's still there. It's located at 116 West 11th Street. Lisa was a good student. Her teachers liked her. She was well liked by the other children and the staff and faculty. And she was very outgoing in kindergarten. But by the time she was in first grade, she was becoming more and more withdrawn. She seemed depressed. She would show up to school in dirty clothes or clothes that didn't even fit her. They were too small. And her hair wouldn't be brushed or combed, and it would be matted with knots. And she just looked disheveled all the time. And teachers raised concern about this to the principal, and the principal called the Steinbergs in. And by this time, um, by 1987, uh, Joel and Hedda had adopted another child, a little boy, um, they named Mitchell. And when the principal of Lisa's school called Hedda and Joel in to talk to them about the condition that Lisa was in, they said that their 16-month-old son had beaten her up. Doesn't quite uh, account for the dirty clothes and the unbrushed hair. But a little bit about Mitchell, real quick, as a sidebar. He was born on June 21st, 1986, to a high school student, a 17-year-old high school student named Nicole Smigel. And Nicole knew that she couldn't take care of the child, and she wanted to go to college. She knew that she couldn't provide the kind of life for the baby that he deserved, and so she placed him for adoption, and Joel facilitated that once again. And once again, he took the baby home instead of putting him with a family. So once again, he has broken the law. And that was when Lisa was 5 years old. So we're going to skip ahead a little bit to October 30th of 1987. It's a Friday. It is the day before Halloween, when probably kids' favorite holiday. If they're anything like I was when I was a kid, I loved Halloween. Um, the Greenwich Village School had a Halloween party that day. All of the classes had their own individual parties, and students were allowed to dress up in their Halloween costumes. And everyone did that except for Lisa. Lisa once again showed up to school in dirty, ill fitting clothes and her hair uncombed and matted with knots. And this picture shows just how sad she looked, how sad and broken. Um, this picture makes me very sad. Um, it's hard to look at because previous pictures that I've posted, she was so cute, and so she looked so happy, and she had been the apple of Joel's eye, and still was in an odd sort of way, but she just wasn't being well cared for, and she was being abused, physically abused. Um, by the following Wednesday, Lisa would be dead. And so we're going to get into what exactly happened. or what we know happened. Um, this is a hard one, guys. Um, this one makes me very angry, but let's get into it. On November 2nd at 6:40 a.m. Well, let's skip to the night before. Okay, so at about 3 o'clock on November 1st, Joel woke up from having been asleep, having passed out. He had smoked a bunch of cocaine, and so he passed out, but he woke up around 3 p.m. on November 1st and asked Hedda if she and Lisa had drunk any water, to which Hedda said no. And to punish them for not drinking water, he was always concerned about their water consumption. So, to punish them for not drinking water, he gave them hot pepper and made them eat it. Real nice guy. And so they did. They did, everything that Joel said to do. And he told Lisa, or I'm sorry, he told Hedda that he would be going out that evening. He had a business meeting, a business dinner, and he would be going out. And so he went back in the bedroom to get ready for dinner, start getting dressed and everything. At about 6 o'clock, a little before 6, Lisa asked Hedda if she thought that her dad was going to take her with him to the business dinner. And Hedda said, I don't know, go ask him. And so Lisa goes into the bedroom and she's gone for quite a while. And about 6 o'clock, Joel walks, or at that time, Hedda had gone into the bathroom, and Joel walks into the bathroom with Lisa draped over his arms, um, and she was unconscious. And she asked what had happened, and he said, what do you mean, what happened? Something happened to her, I don't know, and we need to do something about it. We need to take care of her. And so they placed her on the floor and they started trying to get her to wake up, um, to no avail. So, uh, hold on just a minute. Just got this part out. Okay. So they couldn't get her to wake up. So they just left her there. And Joel at 7 o'clock left for his business meeting and had worked on Lisa off and on, trying to get her to wake up, but she wouldn't. And before Joel left, he told her to go relax, that he would wake her up when he got home, that he would wake Lisa up when he got home. So Hedda left a naked, unconscious Lisa on the cold bathroom floor, and went into where Joel's desk was and started rearranging his files, because that's what you do when your child is unconscious. You take care of paperwork. Okay, sorry. A little snarky. This one pisses me off. But anyway, so Joel got home about 11 o'clock that night, and he and Hedda, um, they check on Lisa, and she's fine. I'm kidding. No, she's not. And they don't check on her. They go and start freebasing cocaine again. They freebase for a while and then they pass out. And about 4 o'clock that morning, Joel wakes up and Lisa is still unconscious on the bathroom floor. And so he and Hedda pick her up and put her on the bed. And Joel goes and looks for a medical journal to see if he can figure out what's wrong with her. What's wrong with her is that she's unconscious. and you've done something to her to cause her to be unconscious. But you won't find that in a medical book because it's not in a medical book. Anyway, he goes and looks for a medical book to see if he can figure out what's wrong with Lisa. And he comes back and he tells Hedda, I don't know what's wrong with her. And Hedda says, well, you know, here's a thought. Maybe we should call 911 and see if they can help her. If, maybe the EMTs can help her. And Joel says no. And about 6 o'clock, Hedda had fallen asleep and she woke up about 6 o'clock. And Lisa was yet again still unconscious and still naked and still black and blue from bruises and cuts and scrapes all over her body. And Hedda says again, can I call 911? And Joel says no. Well, by this time, not only was Lisa unconscious, she was no longer breathing. So Joel starts performing CPR, and that doesn't work. And finally, at 6:40 a.m. on November 2nd, this child has been unconscious for 12 hours now. He finally relents and lets Hedda call 911. And while she is on the phone with 911, Joel is trying to do CPR, but Lisa is on the bed. And you cannot do CPR on the bed because you can't do the chest compressions. You have to have a flat, hard surface to do chest compressions. You can't do it on a soft bed. So I'm just saying. So officers get there, and when they get there, Officer DeLuce, who is with the New York Police Department, knocks on the door and doesn't get an answer. Knocks on the door again, doesn't get an answer again. And so this time he bangs on the door with his fist, and finally Hedda opens the door. I'm assuming she had the chain on the door because she just opened it a crack. And I think most NYPD would have, if they had a call that a child wasn't breathing, that they would have pushed their way into the apartment if they could have. So Hedda peeked her head out and acted like she didn't know why they were there. Just a little strange. And the officer said, we got a call about a child in distress. And she said, oh, yeah. And she opened the door and let them in. And they noticed that Hedda had what appeared to be a broken nose. She had a split lip, and she was battered and bruised from head to foot. And about that time, and the apartment is in horrible condition. There's trash everywhere. There's piles of paper all over the floor. There's piles of clothes everywhere, both dirty and clean. It's just atrocious. And they notice in a corner there is a playpen frame with a little boy in it, 16-month Mitchell. Excuse me. And he is tied to something, and his clothing is soiled and wet with urine and soiled with feces, and he is sitting in it, and his diaper is full, and he is holding a bottle of milk that has curdled. And like I said, he's tied to something, I guess, to keep him in the playpen. About that time, Joel walks out with Lisa in his arms like this, carrying her by her armpits. And she's unconscious, and she's blue, and she's covered in bruises and cuts. And they place Lisa on the floor, and the EMTs immediately begin doing CPR while Officer DeLuce starts investigating the apartment. Now, this is a one bedroom apartment, but it's 2 rooms. So you've got your front room that's like the living room, dining room, kitchen, and then a bedroom and the bathroom. So there's not a lot to investigate, but he notices that there's just mess everywhere. There's, like I said, there's trash, there's stacks of papers, piles of clean and dirty clothes. but he notices on a table that there is a fish tank with two fish in it, and it is immaculate. It is so clean. It's got fresh water in it. The water's nice and warm and it's bubbly like it's supposed to be with the little aerator in it. And it's a stark contrast to the condition of the apartment. Um, it's very sad that there's two fish. And I'm not, I'm definitely not a proponent for cruelty to animals, but when you take better care of two fish than you take of your child or your children, something's wrong. Anyway, uh, they notice little Mitchell, and so a female officer named Officer Rivera comes in and she takes Mitchell, and takes him out of the apartment, and he becomes a ward of the state. Um, and Hedda, the EMTs are not able to revive Lisa, so they put her on a gurney, take her down to the ambulance, and rush her to St. Vincent's Hospital. And then Hedda and Joel are uh, taken down to the 6th precinct, and where they are questioned. I hear a cat. Oh, hi! One of my little kittens is in here. Um, where they are questioned. Uh, and the lead investigator, Bill Leckenmeyer, notices all the bumps and bruises and everything with Hedda, and he decides that he wants to videotape Hedda. She answers his questions, but they're very monotone and almost as if she was programmed with what to say. And so he pulls out the video camera and he videotapes her head to foot of the injuries, and then he talks to her. And he takes note that she has not at any time asked anyone how Lisa is doing. Just a little side note there. So in the videotape, he documents her injuries, and they consist of things such as clumps of hair missing from her head where they had been torn out, uh, numerous fractures to her ribs, nose, and jaw, and cheekbones. Large bruises and scars cover her back, stomach, and arms and head. And her left leg has sores on it so bad that gangrene has set in. Uh, and at the hospital, the doctors and nurses are working on Lisa, trying to revive her. They eventually have to put her on life support on a ventilator, and that is how she is alive. And they wait for her to wake up. It would be November 4th. Lisa is still in a coma, and the decision has been made that she should be removed from life support. Now it gets a little tricky because Joel and Hedda did not adopt Lisa legally, so they are not legally her parents. Michelle Launders is legally her mother, but they can't find Michelle. They are looking for her, but time is kind of the essence. And they get to a point where they can no longer wait to find her. And so the state of New York makes the decision to remove life support from Lisa. That was on November 4th, late at night, probably close to midnight. And by 8:55 a.m. on November 5th, 1987, Lisa has passed away in her sleep. And so she is considered brain dead, which is the legal uh, definition of death in the state of New York. So, at just 6 years old, Lisa was failed by every person in her life. Lisa fell through the cracks. The day after Lisa's death, the charges against Joel were upgraded from attempted murder to first-degree manslaughter, second-degree murder, and endangering the life or welfare of a child. And he was held without bond at Rikers Island. And New York City District Attorney Robert Morgenthau said that Lisa's death was one of the most tragic and horrible cases he had ever seen. In the months after Lisa died, hundreds of stories came out about people or from people who had called child welfare services, they'd called the police, they had spoken to teachers at the school and the principal at the school. Um, People cared about her, and it, and the people who should have cared the most about her just let her be abused. They abused her, let her be neglected, let her be treated like a worse than a rat in a gutter. And like I said, the system failed her. She fell right through the cracks. You have hundreds of people reporting to different agencies that this child is being neglected and abused, and all of the things that were done to her, and no one does anything. In fact, one of the officers said, let's see if I can find the quote. Okay, here it is. Quote, "It's easy to say now that we should have done this or we should have done that. The police should have picked it up because the police did respond to the apartment on several occasions, and the Bureau of Child Welfare should have picked it up because there were numerous complaints, over 100 complaints from neighbors. Hedda Nussbaum went to the hospital. The hospital should have picked it up. It just didn't happen." End quote. I like this investigator. I watched a documentary with him in it, and I really liked him, but that pissed me off because it's again saying, we should have done this and we didn't, and oh well, we'll do better next time. There's no next time for Lisa. Anyway, Joel is now charged with first-degree manslaughter, second-degree murder, and endangering the welfare of a child, and being held at Rikers until until his trial. And something interesting happened in the time, in that period of time, while he was in jail awaiting sentencing. TV cameras were allowed in the courtroom in New York City for the first time. And the first case that they were in the city for was a sentencing trial or sentencing hearing for a man named Robert Chambers, who had murdered and been found guilty of murder of a woman named Jennifer Levin in Central Park. And this was interesting because this was an 18-month-long experiment and would lead to the founding of Court TV, one of my favorite channels. Anyway, as the stories come out about the condition that Hedda is in, the public quickly grew sympathetic towards her. Most felt that she had been so beaten down by Joel that she was virtually powerless to do anything to save Lisa, so the charges against her were dropped. Many say that Joel Steinberg would never receive a fair trial since he was tried so heavily in the court of public opinion. But in my opinion, if he hadn't acted like an arse and been unwilling to take any responsibility for the way that Lisa was treated and the way that she died, then maybe people wouldn't have been so angry at him. Women's groups across New York City reached out to Hedda Nussbaum, offering psychiatric care, legal advice, and medical treatment, all at no cost to her. And after speaking with Hedda, the prosecutors wanted her to testify against Joel, but she refused. And then an article came out in a Long Island newspaper called Newsday. And in this article, Joel had been interviewed by a man named Maury Terry, who was an investigative reporter with Vanity Fair magazine. And in this article, Joel had said that he basically blamed Hedda for the injuries that Lisa had. He said that he had never once hit them, and that was all lies. He had nothing to do with the injuries and didn't know what happened. And although he didn't name Hedda as Lisa's abuser, it was clear that that was his meaning since she was the only other adult in the home. And so he claimed that Hedda was responsible for the death of Lisa because she participated in sadomasochistic cults. On I'm sorry, May 9th, 1988, attorney Barry Scheck announced that Hedda had decided to testify against Joel. She said, quote, "I continued to feel I was in love with him all that time. And then I think everything just sort of came together suddenly. I'd started writing and drawing in a journal. Then I started writing, cursing at him, meaning Joel. And then I turned the page and wrote to Lisa. I said, I'm sorry, Lisa. I'm sorry I didn't see this sooner. It's too late to help you, but maybe we can help another child." End quote. And the more I read that, the more it kind of makes me angry. I don't like that she wasn't charged with anything. I think that if nothing else, and I understand she was abused and beaten down and all of that, I understand that. But this is an educated woman. This is a very smart woman. You don't become the senior editor at Random House of any department by being stupid. She was very smart, is very smart. She's still living. Um, I think that if nothing else, she should have been charged with um, depraved indifference, maybe. Um, she participated in, I think that she participated in what happened to Lisa. And I don't know that she was necessarily um, so beaten down that she didn't know it was wrong. I just, maybe because I've never been in that situation, I have a hard time understanding that. Like, I understand sticking around and being abused. Maybe you think you deserve it, or maybe you like it in some sick kind of way. But when you allow your children to be abused, that's a whole other thing. I just don't get it. Um, but anyway, that's just my opinion. Don't come for me. Don't at me. Um, that's just what I think. Anyway, prosecutors are preparing their star witness, Hedda Nussbaum, and the defense is working just as hard against Hedda Nussbaum. The defense would argue that Joel was loving and kind to Lisa, which caused Hedda to be consumed with jealousy because Lisa had taken her place. Um, Although that doesn't really uh, explain why Mitchell was abused, because Mitchell was 16 months old. He couldn't have taken anybody's place. But anyway, I digress. Um, anyway, so on October 26th, 1988, it is announced that Hedda will not testify, or I'm sorry, that she will not, excuse me, that she will not be charged, that all of the charges against her had been dropped. And uh, public opinion was split. Many felt that Miss Nussbaum should have been held at least partially responsible for Lisa's death due to her indifference, and others felt that the prosecution was right in dropping the charges. So, once again, the city is kind of divided. The state knew that for them to successfully prosecute Joel, they would have to prove that his beating of Lisa had resulted in her eventual death. And to do this, they called the state medical examiner named Dr. Aglay Charlotte. I have no idea if that's how you pronounce it. If it's not how you pronounce it, I apologize. I believe it's a French name, and I don't know French. I can count to three in French. That's about it. Um, and I can say I don't speak French. So Um, I'm going to call her Dr. Charlotte. I don't know. It's Charlot. So that is the way this American is pronouncing it. And if it's wrong, I apologize. But anyway, Dr. Charlotte testified that Lisa's injuries were suggestive of, but not conclusive of trauma. And she was not the only one who felt that way. The chief of pediatric neurology, Dr. Mary Lell from St. Vincent's Hospital, said that the injuries that Lisa sustained were consistent with a forceful blow and that the blow could have been from a fist. Now, I will note that there was a bruise shaped like a fist on Lisa's jaw. I don't know which jaw. I don't know if it was right or left. Um, and when she arrived at the hospital, she was covered in bruises from head to toe, literally from head to foot. She was one big bruise, basically. She had cuts and abrasions on most of her body. She had one really large bruise on her back that was unusual. And then she had smaller bruises on her back that were in various stages of healing. She had cuts and bruises on her face and arms, and, she was basically one big bruise. Um, and so those two doctors couldn't say conclusively that Lisa had died from being hit, but uh, what is his name? Dr. Douglas C. Miller of New York University's Medical Center testified, and he gave the most compelling testimony of the trial about Lisa's head trauma. He said, quote, brain damage was blunt head trauma and nothing else, end quote. He compared the trauma that Lisa's head had sustained to that of head blows that professional boxers sustain from being hit in the head, and they sometimes die from them. Quote, they never, meaning boxers, never have their skulls fractured either. Hedda Nussbaum did not have the strength or energy needed to deliver such a blow, end quote. Dr. Miller's testimony would be the deciding factor in the guilt of Joel Steinberg. Um, he he basically said that Lisa had sustained brain injury because her brain had smashed against the walls of her skull. Joel, of course, did not take the stand in his own defense, but he would not remain silent. He wrote a letter to the Long Island Newsday newspaper against the advice of his attorneys. On November 25th, 1988, the newspaper published that letter, and in part it said, quote, my feelings for Lisa are almost inexpressible. She was the world to me, and I love and miss her deeply. Just once look at her smile in those photographs, and you'll understand my feelings. My sadness and sense of loss are more than I can bear at times. Regarding Hedda, I must tell you that I loved her very much. I can only hope that she is capable of the truth in relating the events of Lisa's life and the events of Lisa's last night with us. Given what I have read, I fear Hedda may no longer be the person I knew and loved, end quote. And that's because you can't control her anymore, Joel. Get it through your head. You know that. So, Hedda testifies, and she gives a detailed accounting. She says that her testimony began on the afternoon of December 1st, 1988. She slowly walked past the table where Joel was sitting with his attorneys, and she took the stand, and you could tell that she was in control and she was no longer afraid of Joel. The courtroom audience and America were captivated. The injuries to Hedda's face were still visible. She was now 46 years old, spoke softly and slowly, and was hunched over like an old woman. At times she seemed evasive and detached as she testified. She mixed up dates and times and was often confused. She couldn't remember details of Lisa's last days, but overall her testimony was effective in detailing her life in the Steinberg home. She testified that there were times when Joel would force her to sleep in the tub or on the floor. She had to ask permission to eat or drink. She said, quote, "I was extremely attached to him. I thought he was the most wonderful person I had ever met, and basically I worshipped him literally. I thought he had supernatural powers of ESP and healing, and a lot of godlike powers. The abuse began almost immediately after we met." End quote. Hedda testified that in 1978, Joel had hit her so hard that she had needed medical attention. In that year alone, she had received no fewer than 10 black eyes. That's almost one a month. And there was a time in 1981 that Joel beat her so badly that she had ruptured her spleen. If she had not received treatment, she would have died. She said over the next few years, she withstood beatings with a broomstick handle, an exercise bar. She had her teeth knocked out. She suffered broken bones, a broken nose, broken cheekbones, broken ribs, and had her hair ripped from her head. And prosecutor Peter Casolaro had cited 13 separate specific instances of abuse from Joel, but the judge only allowed 5 because he didn't want that testimony to sway the jury. Whatever. Hedda had never been able to break away from Joel. She said, quote, "I felt it was the worst thing in the world that could happen to me, that I couldn't survive without him, and I felt like I would kill myself if I was without him." End quote. She says that their drug use varied a lot. There were times when they used every day for several days in a row. There were times that they would go a couple of months without using, but Joel always used a lot more than her. She Hedda would be on the stand for 7 days, and each day revealed more disturbing information about her life with Steinberg. But the most damning evidence she would give would be her account of the night of November 1st, 1987, which I've already given, but I'm going to give it again because it's worth repeating. Nussbaum said that she had not slept that night, but that Joel woke up around 3 o'clock p.m. She said, quote, "The first thing I remember is that Joel asked both myself and Lisa if we had drunk enough water that day. Joel always explained that I didn't drink enough water." End quote. When she told him she had not, Joel made her and Lisa eat hot pepper. According to Hedda, Joel told her he had a dinner meeting that evening and left the room. Lisa asked Hedda, "Do you think Daddy's going to take me with him tonight?" To which Hedda said, "I don't know. Go ask him." Lisa went into the bedroom where Joel was, while Hedda went into the bathroom. This was about 6 o'clock. A few minutes later, Joel walks into the bathroom with a limp Lisa laying across his arms, and Hedda says she was lying in his arms limp. She asked Joel what happened, and Joel responded, quote, "What's the difference what happened? This is your child. Hasn't this gone far enough?" End quote. Together they placed Lisa on the bathroom floor, and Hedda tried to revive her, but there was no response. Hedda said that Joel went into the bedroom to finish getting ready while she continued to supply first aid to Lisa. Around 7 p.m., Joel was preparing to leave for dinner. He told Hedda, "Relax, go with her, stay in harmony with her." Hedda told him she was worried about Lisa, and Joel promised he would get her up when he got back. Hedda testified that while Joel was out to dinner, he called the apartment to check on Lisa and gave Hedda permission to eat. She said she told him that Lisa was still on the bathroom floor and was still unconscious. She had tried several times to revive Lisa, but nothing had worked. She said, quote, "I realized no matter what I did, it didn't seem to make much difference. So I didn't need to work with her every minute. And I wanted to keep busy, so I rearranged Joel's files." End quote. Joel returned to the apartment around 11 p.m. that evening, and he and Hedda began freebasing cocaine. She said, quote, "You put the crystallized cocaine, the freebase, in the top part of the pipe, put water in the pipe, and then you draw through a tube." End quote. Or, I'm sorry, continue quote. "Mr. Steinberg smoked for a couple of hours until the cocaine that we had was gone, and I smoked a small amount." End quote. Hedda testified that while they freebased, Steinberg mentioned Lisa, saying, "One thing he said was about Lisa. I knocked her down and she didn't want to get up." That was a quote, sorry. "The staring business had gotten to be too much for him," she said. Quote, "Joel had been saying that I was staring at him and that both children were staring at him." End quote. Hedda said they continued to smoke cocaine until about 4 a.m. They checked on Lisa again and she was still unconscious. They picked her up and placed her on the bed, and then Hedda began looking through a medical book for advice. Hedda said that Joel stayed up and read medical books to see if he could figure out what was wrong with Lisa while I went to sleep, meaning Hedda. At about 6:20 a.m., Steinberg called out for her and said she stopped breathing. Hedda wanted to call 911, but Joel told her to wait while he gave her CPR. When that failed, he told Hedda to go ahead and call. By the time Hedda began talking to the 911 operator, Lisa had been unconscious, cold, and naked for over 12 hours. She said, quote, "I thought Joel would be able to restore her. I feel horrible. It's something I'll have to live with and regret for the rest of my life." End quote. On January 23, 1989, the jury was given the case for deliberation. For the next 8 days, the jurors' tempers would flare, arguments would explode into fights, and feelings would be hurt. It was the hardest thing many of the jurors had ever gone through. At one point, the jury foreperson asked that the judge clarify what the meaning of first-degree manslaughter was. And at 6:40 p.m. on January 30th, 1989, the verdict was read. Joel Steinberg stood with his lawyers for the reading of the verdict from the jury foreperson. The following is that verdict. On the charge of second-degree murder, we the jury find the defendant not guilty. On the charge of first-degree manslaughter, we the jury find the defendant guilty. When the jury foreperson said that Joel was guilty of first-degree manslaughter, he shook his head, shrugged his shoulders, and appeared to be angry, but he did not speak. While Steinberg had avoided the most serious charge, he still faced a maximum sentence of 25 years in prison. After a trial that lasted 3 months, had more than 100 exhibits of evidence, heard 52 witnesses, and 6,000 pages of testimony, Steinberg would be punished for his role in the death of Lisa Steinberg. He was held at Rikers Island while he awaited sentencing on March 24, 1989. At the sentencing hearing, Judge Harold Rothwachs allowed Steinberg to offer his version of the events that led to the death of Lisa. Okay, so this is Steinberg's chance to say what happened. And this is what he says. Quote, "At no point did I ever strike them in any form. Those children were not locked in a house of horrors." He said that he and Lisa loved one another and that he had consistently joyous, happy relationship with her. He said that his only real crime was having an error in judgment. Then he said that he had been treated unfairly. "It's not like a defendant who stands before you and perpetrates a crime on an outside victim. I'm the loss. I'm the victim." End quote. The victim, my eye. Okay. Judge Rothwachs said he did not agree with Steinberg, and he sentenced him to 8 1/3 to 25 years in prison, the maximum. Steinberg would serve his time at the Southport Correctional Facility in New York. And to follow up, Hedda Nussbaum remained under psychiatric care for years and slowly got her life back on track. She joined a support group in Westchester County. She even became a counselor to battered women. She has undergone several surgeries to repair the damage done to her broken nose, her cheekbones, and the damage to her eyes. In an April 2002 newspaper article, she said she feels traumatized by her life with Joel, but feels she must move on. She said, quote, "They are my children, and they will always be my children, but I can't live in the past. I have to live my life now," end quote. Hedda has since changed her name and moved away from New York City. Michelle Launders, Lisa's birth mother, accepted a settlement for her lawsuit against the New York City agencies that had failed to protect her daughter. The settlement was awarded October 1999 for $985,000. Michelle also sued Joel Steinberg, who reportedly had $3 million in the bank at the time of his arrest, but she has never been able to collect any money from him. Nicole Smeagol, who was Mitchell's birth mother, once she heard about the arrest, she contacted the Bureau of Child Welfare and expressed that she would like to get her child back, which they agreed with, and she got him back shortly after, changed his name to Travis, and thank God he has no negative effects from his time with Hedda and Joel, and he doesn't remember any of it. Elizabeth Lisa Steinberg is buried in the Gates of Heaven Cemetery in Valhalla, New York. She is buried near a large oak tree with branches that hang over her grave. In a quote by Detective Mark Gatto, in an article titled "Joel Steinberg, Attorney, Child Torturer, and Murderer," Mark says, quote, "The flat gray tombstone that marks her final resting place is a scant 18 by 24 inches, dimensions that are somehow too small for the magnitude and manner of her death. She is remembered well in New York, the smiling face of a little girl who no one could save from an inexplicable cruelty." Excuse me. In February 2000, Joel had his first parole hearing, which was denied. Then in January 2002, he testified at his second parole hearing at the Southport Correctional Facility. His parole had previously been denied, and in this hearing, Steinberg once again stated his innocence. Parole Board Commission member Marietta Gaylor asked for Steinberg's version, to which he stated, quote, and this pisses me off. He said, quote, "I have more responsibility in my own heart and my own soul personally. It's very easy to realize how many things I did wrong and shouldn't have done or should have done. I was extremely close to and described as a doting father, totally involved, who maintained a friendship with these children and personally took them for continual medical and educational care and spent all my free time with them. This is a huge loss. It's very painful." End quote. Whatever, Joel. Go something. Go away. Marietta Gaylor responded, quote, "During the course of the instant offense, a vulnerable child who was in your care lost her life due to your failure to get medical attention in a timely manner." End quote. Steinberg was once again denied parole. His next parole hearing would be set for January 2004. At that parole hearing, he was granted parole and he was released by the state of New York on June 30th, 2004, under the state's good time law. Bullcrap. This law mandates that the release of inmates who show good behavior while incarcerated after having served 2/3 or more of their maximum sentence. And I'm sorry, his crime was murdering a child. Of course he's not going to do it again. He's in prison. Whatever. After his release, he moved to Harlem, where he went to work in construction, and he maintains his innocence to this day. Of course he does. Okay, so like I said, that was the first true crime case that I ever read the book on. It holds a special place in my heart. Little Lisa would be in her, what, 30s now? 40s? I don't know. 87. She would be in her late 30s. Um, I have a son her age, a little bit younger than her. Just he was born the same year, but later in the year. And it just no, I'm sorry. He was born the year that she died. I'm sorry. Anyway, this one just makes me angry. It may not be the worst case you've ever heard of. I mean, I've heard of much more uh, horrible cases, much more horrible. But I also didn't go into a lot of detail about this one. If you want to know more about this case, I would recommend reading that book by Sam Ehrlich. Again, it's called Lisa, Hedda, and Joel: The Steinberg Murder Case by Sam Ehrlich. Ehrlich, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but it's Ehrlich. Good book, very good book. Um, so that's all I've got today for you today. I do want to give a unsolicited, unpaid for shout out to Proton VPN. It is the VPN I use, and it is free. Whenever there's something free, there's always a catch. The catch is that you can only connect to servers in the U.S., in the Netherlands, and in Japan. So if you're wanting to use a VPN for like connecting to Netflix in other countries, probably can't do that. Although I don't know if there's Netflix in the Netherlands or Japan or not, but that is the only downside to having the free VPN. But I use it for protection, so I don't really care about Netflix from other countries. Not too much anyway. I don't have time for watching Netflix anyway. But give them a try. I just went into Google and typed free VPN, and Proton VPN came up. They do have a paid version also. I think it's like $4 a month or something. It might be more than that. I can't remember. But I don't have the money right now for that. So I'm using the free version, and I don't have a problem with it. But like I said, if you want to use it to watch Netflix, like in Germany or something, you're going to need to pay for the VPN, because this one will not connect to Germany or any other countries except for the Netherlands and Japan. That having been said, I hope y'all have an awesome day wherever you are. I hope that you make it a good one. Be good and be careful. Until next time. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment if you want to. And if you don't mind, share this video if you think someone you know would be interested in hearing about this case. I appreciate you, I love you, and I hope you all have a wonderful day, and we will see you again next time.